Okay, we'll call this meeting to order Thursday, April 2nd at 8:30 a.m. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Bracco. Councilmember Klein.
Here.
Councilmember Fugazi.
Here.
Councilmember Hilton.
Here.
Councilmember Marks.
Here.
Councilmember Ramirez.
Here.
Mayor Boso.
Here. All right, thank you, everybody, for being here this morning. Before I turn it over to Dave, like I did last week, I just want to make one point clear. Last week, during our discussions, I thought it was great discussions. There probably was a little confusion on if people should look to you to talk or look to me. And I would just, at this point, I'm going to ask folks to look to you. Since you have a better view of people, it's hard for me to see down this way. So as we speak during today's meeting, look towards Dave. You put your hand up and he'll call on you. All right, take it away.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me back. So today we're going to get into really, which is the second part of a two-part study session that we started last week. As we did last week, if you have pressing questions, please ask. We do have points to kind of pause and answer questions and have full discussion and with actual questions that we're going to be posing to you to kind of work through this. But certainly, as we go through it, if there's a pressing question, raise your hand and we'll get to you. I personally think that last session went really well. We covered everything I think that we hope to cover in terms of looking at the legislative agenda, understanding that, what your priorities are, and how do we integrate those priorities into this effort that we're going to talk about today. We sent you through an exercise of top 5, bottom 5, kind of threw that at you, but it worked out pretty good in terms of just giving us a feel for where your priorities are. We talked a little bit about department work plans. That was mostly, I think, for awareness, so you understand kind of all the context and all the work that's going on within the departments. Talked about roles and responsibilities and how you all work together. And ultimately, I think, got to a place where an understanding on kind of what the city's priorities are. So great job on that. So today, building off what we worked on last Wednesday, we will focus on developing performance targets that help us kind of measure success, in particular of the city administrator ultimately is where we're going with this. And so certainly when we talk about measuring success, it's about the success of the organization, yes, but also I think the goal here is to understand how we get to a place of measuring success for the city administrator and how that works for you and what fits well for all of you in terms of coming up with things that are fair and measurable and meaningful. So, since we are talking about measuring success, I think it's good to kind of understand what the role of the city administrator is. And I think we can all agree that city manager, city administrator, a lot of people in the community and the public don't really even understand that role. And I can tell you firsthand, working in local government for 40 years, when I was city manager of San Jose, I would have family members say, "What do you do?" You know, and that's okay. You know, the city administrator, city manager are not supposed to be kind of in the necessarily the face of the organization. That's what you all are. But the city administrator does have an important role, and I think it boils down to these bullets on the PowerPoint. And this is really from my perspective. This isn't kind of, you know, out there in the world of literature. But to me, support the mayor and the council. Support the work that you're all doing. That's what the city administrator should be doing. Serving the community. That's what we're all here for, serving the community. And then leading the workforce. And to me, those are the 3 pillars of responsibility for the city administrator. I will tell you it's, and I've said this a lot when I've talked to my peers, it's not rocket science, the work that we do, but it's pretty demanding work that we do. And that's why, you know, it's such an important role. So, when we talk about measuring success, here especially, we're going to be tying this to an ultimate evaluation process that we get to. And so that the purpose of that evaluation, I think, is threefold. One is to provide structured, actionable feedback on performance, and that's what we're going to be working on today. Two is to align the goals of the council and the administrator, and I think we did a lot of that in session one, made a lot of progress there. And then third, strengthening the working relationship. So the evaluation process hopefully does strengthen the relationship between Matt and you all. Just the work you've been doing in the workshop last week and this week is part of that strengthening relationship and building trust with one another. So to make use of our time, we're going to be presenting something today for you to kind of work with, so that we're not kind of starting from scratch. On the other hand, don't want you to feel like it's fully baked and there can be no changes or we have to stick with it. It purely was so that we can give you something, some structure for you to work with, to react to, and then as we work through it today, we'll figure out how it fits best for Gilroy. You'll see here, and I'm going to kind of preface this, that we wanted to take advantage of kind of industry standards and practices when it comes to evaluating a city administrator, but also integrate kind of specific things that are important to Gilroy. So we're proposing a process that really blends those two things, industry standard criteria and specific initiatives that are important to Gilroy and have meaning to you and have meaning to the public. So you've seen this in the packet. We're sharing this approach that allows you to kind of work with this for the evaluation process. And as I mentioned, there's kind of these two distinct parts. One part, the top part there, are performance measures that you commonly find in city administrator, city manager evaluation packets. And then the second part are special initiatives that are specific to Gilroy. I'm going to ask you, don't focus too much on the details quite yet. We're going to get into this stuff here in the next few slides, but just understanding kind of the concept that we're presenting is these two parts that we've woven together. And so, I don't want to overemphasize this, but this is not a recommendation or a staff recommendation in a traditional sense. Like I said, it's really allowing us to kind of work with something and then decide how that plays out best for Gilroy. Another kind of component to this is a point structure that allows kind of proportional importance. And so you may want to have, and you will have the opportunity to have input in terms of how this proportional importance plays out between the kind of the industry standard performance measures and the special initiatives. And so we'll come back to this and make sure that whatever structure we come up with, it's weighted correctly for how you feel is what the most important criteria is to measure success. So, as I mentioned, we're going to kind of go back now and kind of build this up step by step and allow you to kind of dive a little deeper into the details. So starting with the first part, the industry standard criteria, I'd like to spend just a moment on each one of those, and just as you're listening and thinking, decide whether it kind of is resonating with you. Is it kind of hitting what you think is important in terms of measuring success? Are there things missing? Are there things that need to be added? So the first category.
Dave?
Yes, please.
I'm going to interrupt and ask you if I can make one comment.
Yep.
I would like to take this moment, and maybe I should have done this first, is just as a reminder to council. Maybe I've taken this for granted a little bit, but so I'll go all the way back to when Matt was hired. Mm-hmm. We did have an ad hoc committee that was responsible for negotiating. That would be Councilmember Bracco and Councilmember Fugazzi. So I just want to be as informative as possible for the rest of council and anybody else who's listening to this, is that you mentioned earlier something about this has a lot to do with what's what's conventional in the business of working with the city administrator and what's unique to Gilroy.
Yep.
And I think it's important that we call this out, and I'll ask for both of their input after I go as well. If you go all the way back to the negotiation process when we were negotiating with Matt, as always, there was a certain ask of a compensation package when he was negotiating with us. And this is a lot of this, what we're talking about today, stems from the negotiations with Matt when he was getting hired. And that is, we were looking for some type of package or incentive program or compensation package that have incentives built into it. So in that process, Matt accepted less than his original ask with the idea that our ad hoc wanted to incentivize his package so that, maybe even one day he gets past what would be normal in the industry for a city of our size. But we wanted to incentivize it and make sure that it was parallel with the success of Gilroy and the success of the organization. Yeah. So I just want to remind council that that's how we got to this point, and that's why we're seeing something a little bit later in your presentation about weighted performance measures and special initiatives that might be a little bit unique to Gilroy and not conventional in the industry. So as we're going through that, I want to say that, and feel free, you guys, to help me out here.
So as we went into the process to look for a city administrator and got all the feedback from everybody on council, there was a very strong feeling of having a performance component into the mix, and it worked out that we could do that with, on the compensation side, both for Gilroy and also both for an upside for Matt. And the second thing that this formalizes much better is there was a pretty strong deficiency in the organization here in terms of a methodical way of evaluating the city administrator. And we all saw that when we, when we came to evaluation time, the first one that I had to do, that there wasn't a great structure around it. There wasn't really good rules. And so coming to something like this is super important, and it's super important, I think both to have what is the traditional qualitative kind of evaluation, but at the same time bring a quantitative component into this where we can look at milestones and progress, and then allow Matt to have the incentives. And the discussions we had also is how this can possibly flow through and start to become kind of a thing for Gilroy in terms of like looking at performance matters and how we can reward people. So I think it's a bigger thing than that, and I appreciate that we're here to do this, and I think that it frames it really well. Yeah.
For me, I was looking at it more through hiring of city managers that don't do what we ask them to. And this way, if the city manager does what's asked of them, be rewarded. So that's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that just somebody who's been through this a few times now, we've also never done this publicly. So I appreciate the ad hoc for kind of pushing us this way, because when I hear you say it's unique, something unique to Gilroy, a lot of times people think like, oh, we're going to change the policy up so we remove San Jose and all those things we don't like, or another agency, and put in Gilroy. It's like, it's not that.
Right.
It's actually deeper than that. It's unique to this current city council.
Yep.
That is actually changing the course and doing something different altogether. And perhaps that might spur this industry into changing the way that they model other city administrators or executives.
And it's not unique, I would say. It is more rare. I think that's a better way to put it. We're not here, at the front of the line coming up with something completely new,
Right.
and having incentive-based rewards or pay for executives.
Council member?
So when we originally put an ad hoc together, we started it prior to the hiring of the city manager. It was put together to do a performance evaluation of the previous And I was tasked with leading that ad hoc, and I really appreciate the council really jumping in. I was, I've done executive evaluations for years and was mortified at what I saw in terms of an evaluation, and really pushed for bringing in a consultant that would provide us with the standards, that are a little bit more, less rare, but more standardized in terms of how you do a professional executive evaluation. And the council, I really appreciate, they immediately jumped on board, and it started this whole process together. And the really good thing when I read through this packet, at first I was concerned that, okay, we're setting this up in such a great way, but I don't, I think that it is really important, at least for the next few iterations of this, is to have that consultant guide us through in a year from now as we go through the process. I was really glad to see that that was a part of what the plan is moving forward. And so I think that that will also set the tone at the top level and then bring it down. And really pleased about that.
Councilmember?
I would concur with her based on what we went through, and also, like Councilmember Hilton said, previous evaluations and just the way it was, it really put us in a deficit where this has given us a better footing, and I think for the organization, it's a better fit for going forward, incentivizing it at that level. They see that, I agree, that can be translated to the other levels too in the future and how we look at that.
Great. So great discussion and context, and helpful to all of us and me as we kind of move forward through this. So I'm going to kind of charge ahead here. We're going to look at each one of the categories for the qualitative part of the evaluation. So the first one are individual characteristics and professional skills. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but the questions that we're asking here is, does the city administrator, are they a self-starter? Are they innovative? Are they ethical? Do they anticipate challenges that are coming up? To me, this category is really about the leadership skills of the person being evaluated. The next category is organizational management and policy delivery. This one is about delivering on your priorities. This is about delivering on core services to the city. This one's about creating a culture of respect and collaboration. So for me, this one is about the person's management skills and the person's follow through. The next one is relations with council. Is the person carrying out your directives? Is the person responding to your requests, providing information to all of you on a fair and equal basis? Person involving with you on direct conversations and meaningful conversations. So to me, this one is a lot about communication and how the city administrator is communicating with you all. Fiscal management, that's the next category. And this is very fundamental to the role of a city administrator and city manager. Is the budget balanced? Are we delivering costs in an effective and efficient manner? Are reports factual and helpful to you in your decision making? So like I said, very fundamental and basic. This is where we're really talking about we're using the public's money, and we need to be very good about how we do that. The next one is community relations. And this is the final category in the first section. And it's really, this is why we're all here, to serve the community. And so does the city administrator is the city administrator involved with the community, represent the city well, engage with stakeholders, and then also help educate the community about the service delivery that's going on within the city. So these are the 5 categories within the qualitative section of the evaluation. So we're going to move on to the second part. So this is where we kind of integrate and blend together specific initiatives that are important to Gilroy. And what we did is we just took the top 5 from the exercise last week. That's pretty much that straightforward. We're not locked into this, and this can change, but as a starting point, we thought that would be helpful. And certainly that's not to say that the other items on the legislative agenda aren't important. They are, and there's going to need to be a commitment on how those get delivered. But looking at the top 5, I think, is a helpful way to really, all right, these are the top most important things for the city of Gilroy. Let's focus on these things, and let's make sure these things get done, and we can measure success that way. So that's kind of the thinking behind it. So I'm going to go back to this slide here is where we started, and kind of start the discussion on what we're talking about here and seeing if this is going to kind of work for you. I want to throw this up as to kind of help with the discussion process if I can. And so to me, there's, we can kind of build this up or kind of just jump in wherever we want, but do this 2-part approach. Does it work for you? Okay.
So can you go back a slide?
Yes, I can.
I just want to make a comment
Yep.
on the points possible type of thing.
Yes.
So, the performance measures are subjective.
Yep.
Right? So relations with city council. For example, let's assume Matt does complete equivalent to all of us, communicates the same way, everything is absolutely the same. But I don't think he communicates enough. Tom might think he communicates too much. Zach might think he communicates exactly right? So it's subjective,
It
right?
is.
Whereas I'm hoping with these special initiatives that we are moving towards, those are objective, and we're moving towards creating measurable, time-sensitive, specific goals. Did you reach that mark? It's a simple yes or no, right? And so I would prefer that they were weighted the opposite, in that there would be more weight given to these are the, assuming we're keeping those 5, right? These are the initiatives that we as a council have agreed upon are the most important things that need to be done this year, or at least moving towards this year. And we agreed that these are the time dates, these are the measurable outcomes. It's a simple yes or no. The performance measures, there's too much ambiguity there. I don't like Matt. I don't like the way he talks to me. I don't like the clothes he wears. I don't, that type of thing. There's just too much of that. I would prefer more weight to, did he do what we asked him to do, rather than the others. Because the others, organizational management, fiscal management, stuff like that, that is going to follow the initiatives if he's doing the initiatives correctly. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And so, it's within your discretion, and obviously working with Matt, where this proportionality exists. And you're right. Right now, we have it tilted toward these characteristics versus the specifics. So it's at your discretion to kind of figure out what fits best. I'll just say this though, and I like where you're all going. I will tell you though, there are times where a city administrator or city manager's best moments are when everything is going wrong. And the bottom part of the chart isn't even a consideration anymore. And I'm kind of being a little dramatic here, but I think about my term as a city manager.
Well, and I get that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that targets don't move as we go through the year
Yeah.
and the process and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean, let's just say we've got all this with this great plan and this great thing, and then, there's a major earthquake.
Yeah.
That, just completely ruins the infrastructure, this and that, and so now we have shifted
Got
priorities.
it, you got it, okay.
That happens,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
But, or, he's working on Gilroy Sports Park and, I don't know, some major thing happens and it comes to a complete halt, completely out of his control. That's where we go, okay, we get it. But I still feel that the objective should be weighed more than,
Got it.
that's my opinion.
Council member. Yep.
So I think the structure around this is ideal, okay? The weighting is something that we can discuss out. The top part is a qualitative judgment, and it's a judgment call. The bottom part, I mean, think of it when you were going to school, you had your letter grade, and then you had like plays well with others, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so those were the qualitative, and your quantitative was your letter grade. So the bottom part in the quantitative area, we do have this situation where there are extenuating circumstances, and there is some subjectivity that has to come into play, in my opinion, in order for this to work, because you're trying to set goals, you set certain milestones. So each one of those things down there, in my opinion, should have, say, 3 milestones in it or 3 goals that should, those are the targets to hit. And this is a great guideline for council members when we come to this point to say, hey, did we get to milestone 3 on Shark's Ice? Okay, well, no, we didn't get to milestone 3, but hey, this happened and that happened, so I'm gonna give him an 8. But, Carol over here goes, yeah, well, he should have known that should have happened, okay? So I'm not giving him any grace for not hitting that milestone, and I'm giving him a 4. And it adds this nice level, in my opinion, of subjectivity to a quantitative value. And I do agree, thinking that this is reversed. And then the final thing I'll say before I'll let somebody else go is this is not happening in a vacuum, which means we're going to go into a private room and we're all going to have our scores, and we're all going to be sitting here lobbying one way or the other, or telling the other one, because I know we're very transparent and open with each other about this, that you're crazy, he did meet that, or no, he didn't do that. How can you give him a 6 when it really should be an 8? And when the earthquake or the thing or whatever else happens, we're going to adjust to that, because that's what we do.
Yep.
So I wouldn't want us to get too rigid in trying to come up with quantitative numbers, but I do want the city administrator to put down in writing where he thinks we're going to be for each one of these things, that there's 3 things at least that we can use as objective kind of milestones.
Right. Council member?
I kind of like the balance that it is right now, because, I feel that those things that are at the 25 points, those special initiatives, aren't necessarily something that the city administrator is going to be working on a day-to-day and getting down into the weeds, right? Those are for department directors. And so I feel like I like to weigh it a little less, because it's a little bit out of his, not control, but I feel there's more control in the top part, the performance measure. I feel that that's something that I can easily grade on, that I think should be worth more. Another thing that I want us to talk about too is the timing of when the next evaluation will come up, because although all of us have been working really well since the end of November 2024, like when we all got elected, that doesn't mean that this next group that is going to be seated on November 2026 is going to have as much context.
That's why they need more of
evaluate
that
them.
objective guidance, just so
Yeah.
you know, because that objective guidance will help them, even in that short term, to look backwards and make some sort of, and they will have less experience in the top part.
Yeah.
So it kind of, counters that as well. The top part is harder to gauge when you've only worked with somebody for 3 months.
Yeah, totally.
So it sounds like, Mayor,
Sure, sorry. I'm going to carry off what Councilmember Hilton says. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the idea at this point. I want to hear more from all of us about, let's just say, some council members are saying, switch it from the 50, put the 50 on the bottom, the 25 on the top. We're so, we are so motivated by economic development, this council. We have a lot of motivations, but one of them is economic development. And my sense is that the bottom 5 are very tied to the economy in general. And that's one thing that gives me concern about if we, let's just say we flipped them from the 50 and the 25, is that I just feel like there's just a little bit too much weight on something that might be dependent on the economy in general. And the idea, the fact is that we could be stalled out by the economy, yet up on top, it's still extremely important that every single one of those performance measure gets carried out at a high level. My comment.
Councilmember?
I agree with the mayor. However, I look at community relations. Maybe I don't know what he's doing in the community. You know, am I going to ding him for that? Or maybe I know he's doing a little bit. I like it to be more weighted highly on the bottom part, because even if the economy does do a downturn, he could at least be telling us, you know, Shark's Ice is going to do this, this, and this, but however, there is a financial problem right now. At least if we're getting updates, I know that he's working on it. And even though he has department heads that oversee all of that, he has to be involved, you know, with the department heads and coming back and telling us how things are progressing. I just feel it's a little bit too ambiguous up on top if we're really not sure. You know, what's his relationship with each of the city council members? It just, I like the individual characteristics and professional skills. That's important. Organizational management and policy delivery, that would show up. And that would be very important for the bottom part, to have that. Relations with the city council and community relations, I don't know if all of us would have that knowledge to really judge him fairly.
Councilmember?
So I'm a little confused now, because I look at this as if I'm gonna answer those top 5 and put my ratings in, that's what my office feels.
Yeah.
That's my office feels, not what I think another council members or the mayor office feels. It's me, right? So the fact that you might not know the relations with other city council, that doesn't matter. It's what exactly time-stamped on what you perceive on how the relations are with you, and maybe what you perceive on the rest of us. But it is not trying to do research on how Matt interacts with Dion or Greg or anything like that. It's specifically to our office, correct?
But you're basically stating that you want the relations from city council to be twice as important as economic development.
Thank you. I mean, to your point, and I just want to say one thing. In my experience, you know, if you are managing people, you're accountable for how you are managing those people. So I agree that the city administrator will be directing staff, directors, and the directors will be directing their staff, managers, you know, all the way down in order to get these things done. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with the city administrator and how well that is managed.
If I can just say one more thing on that, I'll take a look at it from a private sector view, okay? He's the CEO, okay? The outcomes matter, okay? So if we're the board, I really don't care how he has great relations with the board. I want to see economic development in my company, okay? And if he doesn't have great relations with the board or with the customers or the community, those other things aren't going to happen at all. And so I tend to look at those things on the top are things that city managers like to have in their performance review, because they are a little bit more nebulous, and sorry, that's just a cynic in me, and they will tend to push up that score simply because, oh yeah, it's an 8 on, yeah, he's got good community relations, yeah, he's got this. You're never going to 3 or 4, but the other side of it is what Gilroy really needs, right? To give 5 out of 75 to economic development in a city that's going to be underwater due to public safety shortages it's not right. So either it's flipped or it's 50-50 or something, but the weighting is wrong in my opinion.
Yeah, so it feels like there's support for the two categories and what we're talking about here, and there's support for kind of what's within those categories.
Yes.
It's now down to really kind of how you proportion, what's the proportional importance of those two categories. I just will say, maybe Matt can chime in for a second. And just to kind of help you all, I always felt if the council was going to go through the effort of prioritizing things, which is extremely helpful, I was going to deliver on those things. I can't tell you how many environments that I've worked in where there is no prioritization. It is, I'm supposed to do everything, and that's impossible. So you going through this effort of prioritization is very helpful to Matt and the organization. And honestly, my return to that is I'm going to deliver no matter what. I mean, obviously, there's things that could come up and we have to make adjustments, but it won't be, I don't think, and Matt can jump in right now, it won't be hands off like I'm just going to make sure, hope it gets done. No. He's going to make sure it gets done. Matt?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an interrelationship between the top list and the bottom list, right? As we're working through the items on the top, they're going to drive the completion of the items on the bottom, and vice versa, right? You're going to see as we're working through economic development and the connection there to fiscal responsibility, there's a direct connection there. So there's definitely an interaction. It's an interesting dynamic on the interrelationship. I would also ask for you to think a little bit about council transition. So, our next time to sit together and do an evaluation will be February of next year, and the council could look different at that time. And the following 3 years later, the same thing, right? So what does that look like, and how do we establish something that's sustainable over time, even if those bottom 5 items pivot, right, and they change completely?
Councilmember?
Sorry, go ahead,
Yep.
Tom.
Well, I would agree with both the mayor and Councilmember Hilton on structure, what this does. To me, priorities are always going to change with the change of council because people come back to the table, a new person's elected, they're going to run on what their agenda is, what they want to see happen, and they may not agree with some of that. But it's those top 5 that they're going to be looking through in the relationship with him. And to me, that's more important in relations, in both relations with the council, but then community relations, and how you judge that person, how you look at that person. For me, that's my standpoint and how I look at it. So that's more weighty to me than the bottom.
Councilmember?
So, just for clarity, we are going to have an election in November, assuming, let's just assume we stick with those 5 initiatives. When we have this election and we have new council members come on board, at that point, it doesn't matter what their initiatives are. They come on board with the established initiatives for that performance evaluation period. Then when we go through the process again and we come up with new initiatives, that's when the negotiation, and they may bring forward other initiatives, and then that sets the initiatives for the following year's performance evaluation. So it really doesn't matter when there's a change of council in November as to whether or not they like these initiatives or not. They're already set in stone for that performance evaluation period.
Councilmember?
Yeah, so I think this is, just want to keep going back to, you have to have milestones that are there that can be evaluated, 1. Number 2, we're going to be doing this evaluation as a private group to help influence those people who are new coming on anyway. And 3, the argument that you make that you like more weighting on the top because of the subjectivity, et cetera, and you're using new council members coming in for that is completely off, because having 2 months with somebody, you're not ever going to be able to establish that. But what you can do is look at what are these things that the prior council set up, and did they come close to them? And, oh, by the way, Carol, what do you think? I see that he didn't meet 100, he got to 82. Do you really think that was, oh, okay, now I understand it a little bit better. And so I think, we absolutely have to look at what Gilroy needs now. The whole aspect of this for me when we were discussing it, even during negotiations, is that this is heavily weighted on objective criteria, not on subjective types of criteria. And the last thing I'll say is this whole even division of things too is up for discussion as well. So if we look at this and go, you know what, economic development needs to be 12, and I know you're scoring it, but the score can be 1 out of 10, and you weight it out of whatever weight you want. And so there is a mathematical weighting that you've set up here to say what is more important than another thing, or equally as important as another thing. And that also needs to be evaluated.
Councilman?
So I've been working with Matt for, it's almost 60 days, right? Well, in a few more days, it'll be 60 days. I do have enough to go off of just knowing him for that limited amount of time to answer those top questions. I do. I know that's what, I'm speaking for myself. No. I didn't know Matt at all before this. Okay, hold on. Let me finish.
Councilmember.
I have enough to go off him to feel confident that I can answer those top questions based on my experience today and knowing him for less than 60 days. I feel comfortable with that. The question I have for Matt and the rest of Matt specifically is, so I completely understand what Councilmember Ramirez says. When you get elected in November, you inherit the last part of that budget, right? You inherit that 6 months of the work plan, the legislative plan, the budget. You don't get a bite out of that until the process starts, right? So if in a year from now, if we're gonna be evaluating based on this, at what point will the special initiatives get to change, right? Because the special initiatives were based off our legislative work plan, like ours, not anything that you want to talk about. So how will you adjust that, and when do you plan on like giving us that test again?
I'll just
Because there's 4 of us that'll be here with you during that, no matter what.
That's exactly why you have the milestones that are assigned to these, because then most of these things on here are not going to get done in 6 months. They're going to get done in 16 months to 2 years or whatever it is. So what you end up doing is you end up adjusting the milestones assigned to these, and some fall off for sure and get replaced by another, for sure. Sorry.
Matt, did you want to jump in, or Mayor?
You go ahead first.
All right. So I did want to talk a little bit about sort of individual work plan items and then running the organization and the difference, right? So the top list really lends itself to delivering on services today and looking forward into the future. What does the organization look like in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? How is the work we're doing today lending itself to that vision, so that next year's items on the bottom 5 we're set up to deliver? So how are we set up fiscally next year in year 5 so that we can deliver on your priorities that you established in that time frame? So it's more than what are we doing today? What are we doing in the next 6 months or 12 months? It's about how do we make this organization function optimally in the long term? I think that's what the top is how is this organization going to deliver for the community over my career and then well into the future beyond that?
Mayor.
So I'm going to recap here a little bit and see if the first thing I think we agree on, that we all do agree on, is the fact that there's these performance measures and the special initiatives, the qualitative and the quantitative, like we've talked about. The other thing that I think we agree on, but we haven't talked much about it, but I think we agree on it, and that is the fact that we think that there should be additional line item objectives under the special initiatives, like, for example, in economic development. What are a few things under economic development that could be milestones that we can measure? I think we all agree on that. Am I close? Cool. The part that we have 2 camps on here is the weighted scoring.
That's right.
And I'm not sure if we're gonna do this right this moment, but what I'm gonna suggest is that we try to come to a middle ground on that. And here's just some ideas. I just did quick math, right? There's 5 on each. Would there be anything wrong with us changing the ratings from 1 to 6 on all of them? And that would be a 30 and a 30, and it's based on 60 points total. instead of, I mean, I hear some council members saying they should be switched, the 50 and 25 should be switched, and I hear others saying we kind of like it. And is there any reason why we couldn't start talking about the ratings and making them more equal?
Well, the first thing I'll say too is that the weighting is a mathematical percentage weighting. And when it comes down to how you're grading somebody, my opinion is that you should have uniformity in how you grade somebody, no matter which one it is. So if it's 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. Now, when you get 1 to 10, you get a better granularity out of it than when you get 1 to 5. So my recommendation in how this ends up is that you just determine what the percentage is between these two things. So, you know what, I think it's 50-50, or I think it's 2/3, 1/3 like it is now, or whatever that is, and then you use a common way to give your subjective evaluation that I would suggest is 1 through 10. And really the discussion point that you're trying to have here is, what is that weighting, right? That's what we have to collectively decide. And real quickly to Matt's point about like looking way out into the future, my expectation from a CEO is they are looking out to the future, and they're able to take their 5-year and they're able to divide it up and say, okay, here's my 5-year, here's my 3-year, here's my 1-year, here's my quarterlies, right? And the milestones that I need to get there are all lined up, and they're adjusting, of course, as I go across time, but it's very easy to align those to your objective goals here on the special initiatives.
I would just
Councilmember?
to add one thing. I agree with Councilmember Fugazi in that, they're keeping it uniform and then just determining 50-50, 1/3, 2/3, whatever. I would just like to point out in kind of in a different way than what you just explained with the CEO type of thing, my expectation is when we hire a city administrator knows how to run the business. Knows, he has to keep things financially stable. He has to make sure, the garbages are emptied, however far down that is, whatever. Running the city should be just standard. It's these special initiatives, whatever they are, decided by whatever council, those are the things that we are asking specifically of you to move us in this direction. These are the priorities. I expect you to be able to do all of the other stuff because you're a city administrator. That's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, so I think, I want to make sure and the mayor really basically did this. I think when it comes to these first 4 questions, 3 questions, it sounds like there's a comfort level. It's really this proportionality issue that you're talking about. And I guess the question is, are you able to reach some sort of consensus today, or does that move to a decision in open session where there's a vote or something like that? I don't know. It's up for you all to decide, but I wouldn't necessarily give up on trying to gain consensus on that today if that's...
There's one other question that I did pose that I didn't hear any feedback from council members, and I'd like to know is, do you feel within these groups, okay, that each item within the group is equally weighted, right? Because that also plays into it, right? If, for instance, you don't think community relations is as important as your organizational management and policy delivery, which I would, then there's an individual weighting that happens between those. I know it's getting into the weeds, but at the same time, oversimplifying this, it may not be pushing us toward the excellence that we're looking for.
Councilmember.
I think if we're going to do that, excuse me, each council that goes through this, the iterations, should be allowed to do that, because I do agree with you. Like if we all think economic development is great, it's like, hey, let's weight that more. But I do kind of like having it to be able to revert back, for the next group to be like you said, 50-50, like 1 and 10. But that if there is something extra special that group wants to do it, then that's fine. I completely understand that part. Yeah. I want to make a comment because one of the questions was, do you like these special initiatives? So that was completely different than a process that I've ever been through. So, and I told Matt that. I was like, no one's ever I'll speak for me. No one's ever tested me and said, you got all these priorities, pick a couple. Like, no one's ever done that, especially that fast. And so I appreciated that. I like guardrails. I like being able to get tested like that. So, and I do like the fact that we're just calling them special initiatives. They give no priority. It's just literally a snapshot in time that could change next month. But we're going to go off those. So I do like the idea, the way you came up with that. I do like the idea that ends up also in your performance evaluation, because you didn't necessarily get to pick what our special initiatives were either, and they might not be specialties that you're even good at. I'm not saying that you are or aren't. So I like that trust, and I hope that the public kind of recognizes that too, that was organically done, and you are sort of receiving this organically at the same time. Thank you.
Mayor.
Going back to the conversation about rating, having a different rating or scale for different items, I would ask council to be careful of that. Because as you can see, we have strong opinions here, and we all feel different about things, and that's what's great about this council. But some people are going to think that organizational management and policy and delivery is the most important thing of the performance measures. But someone else can think that community relations are, and I completely respect that. And personally, I don't need it to be a special rating. The special rating is going to be a 10. I mean, that's how it's going to be weighted. If I give him a 10 in community relations, because I think community relations is the most important thing, and I think he's doing a great job. And if I think he's doing an okay job in organizational management and policy delivery, and it's really not that important to me, I'm going to give him a 7. And so I would be careful about us getting into a debate, because we could be here till next week, about how much we should weight. Hold on a second. About how much we should weight each different line item.
What about quantitative?
Yeah.
You only spoke on subjective qualitative.
Well, earlier I said I thought we all agreed that I do think there should be additional light items in there.
No, but I meant on the weighting, because you spoke about, and I'm not in disagreement on the subjective side of keeping equal weighting. It was as an example, but in the initiatives, it very much might be something more important, for instance, in economic development than, say, our police department service review or what have you. And we may have some collective agreement to that, or we might find in exploring it that we're all on different pages, so hell with it, we're just going to go with even Stephen all the way down the line. I don't know, that's why.
My thought is, go back to my initial comment, is I think that we would all have different opinions on the special initiative sides as well as we would on the performance measures. If we want to have a little conversation about it, but my sense is that there are some of us that are going to think that fire service review is not as important as economic development. So then we're going to be right back to where we started. And again, if I give them a 10, it's because I believe that we've done very well, and that's important to me.
So I agree that they should stay. I don't want to start mixing up the numbers in point structure. I think it will lend itself to, I think that we are going to have different priorities when it comes to the special initiatives, but that really, I don't want to say it doesn't matter, but the fact that we have come up with 5 that we pretty much agree on, that's a milestone in and of itself, I think. And so, and if we stick to 5, even if I say, gateway beautification is the bottom of the list and it might be Tom's top of the list, doesn't matter, it's still on the list. And there's still going to be measurable outcomes on that, so it doesn't really matter, right? The fact that we've given 5 initiatives that we've agreed on is, I think, a success. Yeah, I mean, I agree, you'll be able to be more subjective with a 7, 10 or whatever, but I would say keep it 10. I just would advocate that the point weighting is.
Can we make the weighting the same on all of them, on top and bottom?
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Councilmember over here.
I'm fine with 1 to 10 on both of us.
Yeah.
But on the special initiatives, there's only
But I think, Councilmember, and I think what you're all talking, obviously, these are just the categories. There will need to be some milestones established within each one of these and deliverables associated with those.
That's what we need to talk
Yeah.
about, right? That's where we need to get, yeah.
You know, there's nothing on here about stuff like the homeless issue. You know, maybe judged by getting better or worse, you know, over the next 6 months or whatever. You know, I would like to, see something, like with the police department on transparency. It's something we've been talking about for years, and we just never seem to make any movement on it. For example, Morgan Hill had a shooting at their Safeway. And within like 48 hours, they had all the videos online, and they narrated it, and it stopped any conspiracy theories and people in the public, you know, putting the police department down and blaming them. I think it really worked, and I would like to see us move forward towards something like that.
I will remind you all that the entire legislative agenda is going to be worked on and progress made. We've decided to, at this point, pick the top 5 to measure how well Matt is doing, but that's not to say the other items won't be focused on and worked on.
Well, the list was created based on the legislative agenda.
That's right.
Okay, the list was not created based around council members' priorities, right? Clearly, council member Bracco has that priority, and I completely understand, and I'm alongside you with that. And so these particular initiatives, while they could be in the initiatives, I don't believe necessarily that we've done an exhaustive review of council member priorities, so to speak, because we looked at the legislative, slate, and they may or may not completely align. They, most of them should, I would imagine, but you didn't get a voice. His thing did not get a voice in that part of the process. His voice came before that in creating the legislative, agenda time. But there's now a time to look at, did we capture all of that or not? Because of the starting point that we had. It's a great exercise, but was it, inclusive enough?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think on the legislative agenda, it's important that the council gets confident in establishing a legislative agenda and allowing us to work on it. And so the revisit that we did last week was to check in on that. And the validation we got was that the legislative agenda resonated, and there were 5 items that were especially important out of that legislative agenda. This time next year, we'll start fresh, and we'll create a new legislative agenda for the next 2-year period. These items are big, significant efforts for us to work on. We need a runway to be able to do that. And if we're adding to it continually or adding to it and subtracting to it, we just change that momentum. These need to be important enough that we're going to dedicate 2 years to work on them. So pivoting midstream is really a dysfunctional way to move forward with council priorities. So I urge you to be cautious in that front. There's also these other elements that you're talking about that are all important for the community. So the homelessness is important. How I run the organization, the other priorities, how I pivot and bring in things that come up on a regular basis, those are all important. Those are in the top.
Yeah, organizational management and policy delivered, unhoused, right?
Well,
We've
and
created a
things
policy.
should be added to that as well, in my opinion. I really like, if you could go back to that slide that shows how they break down in what those things were on, or the first one, like individual characteristics. So what I think that's really helpful for is somebody who is grading this before can like that, any one of those. So as they're going through those, right, to give a score, they can come up with their own weighting of what matters in this particular one, right? But it's very helpful, I think, to make sure that these are exhaustive. So Councilmember Bracco brought up transparency, right? So organizational transparency, that should live somewhere in that list as well. And if there are things that we have that when we go back and review this and you see things organizationally that are not listed even up there, that's where that you should speak up, I think, and push those things forward, and let's get them into that part of the list.
Agreed. Councilmember.
Yeah, and I think that's a great feedback loop for Matt, right? Specifically, it's like, man, why did I get a 5 from you on professional skills? You're like, nope, I wanted you to work on transparency. I've been telling you about this. I don't care if the rest of the council doesn't worry about it. It's something that's important to me. You're not going to get higher than a 5 from me until you do this. I think that's a great time for him to hear direct feedback. And obviously that's in closed session too. So it's a great way to kind of like air it out.
So we were going to talk about it at the end, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the performance evaluation process and what that looks like and how we get through these and analyzing these.
Yeah, yes. I'm gonna jump ahead here. I'm skipping over that. That's kind of what we're doing right now. Okay, so this time next year, you know, and so part of when Matt and I have been brainstorming this a little bit is how do we bring this to you so that you can work on this, but it leaves space for this evaluation that's going to happen a year from now. And so I think what's contemplated, from what I understand, is you will contract with a facilitator, and Matt will have a facilitated performance evaluation, very, very common. But that facilitated evaluation would be built around what we are doing today. They're going to use this work to use as a roadmap for how that evaluation works. But typically, there's normal components that are involved with that. One-on-one conversations with each one of you. The facilitator will be talking to each one of you. Councilmember?
Just on the first point, can I ask a question? So as far as the process is concerned, are we submitting our evaluations and then we're just telling you why we did it? Or is there lobbying going on in this first process with the facilitator to say, I see that you submitted this, but tell me why this and shouldn't it be this kind of a thing? Or is it just, this is what we submit, here you go?
Well, you're going to work with the facilitator, give the facilitator input. The facilitator is going to take that input and do some work with it in terms of a couple of things. The facilitator's own judgment, are you being fair? Or is there any bias involved? Those sorts of things come into it.
But do we do this, I guess what I'm asking is, from a process, and we work well, and it's not guaranteed that it'll continue, but I like the idea that all of us together are sharing what we think our evaluations are. And Greg is like, Terrence, you're being completely unfair here, in this one. Tell me why you gave him a 4. And I go, well, it's here, and I'm not changing it, Greg.
Yes. So yes,
Okay.
there's going to be a time when you're in closed session and you're all going to be able to, the facilitator is going to share with you the input that they've received, where it came from, and you guys are going to be able to talk it out. I mean, you can hold each other accountable. That's up to the culture of the organization.
Well, I think before it's actually like officially submitted, I think it's a good idea, but because it's a way for us to understand each other's.
Yeah, it's way too premature to define that. So the facilitator will help with that process and what it looks like and where they've had professional experience and success in making that happen. Typically what happens is by submitting your evaluation sort of independently, it helps to even the conversation. So everybody gets full input, whether it's a council member that is less vocal or a council member that's more vocal in a group setting, right? And then the facilitator's job is to work through that, identify where there's similarities amongst it, identify where there's not. Those are good areas for conversation. And then bringing everybody together and talking about it. And there's lots of room in that for, okay, I see what you're saying, or somebody making a case for something else, or somebody pointing out a point that maybe somebody didn't get. So that the initial evaluation isn't locked in. It's not set in stone. It's something that is part of an evolving process to get to. Before it gets to me. Yes.
Mayor? Okay. So that's just the look ahead. And as I said, when we were kind of trying to put this together, we just wanted to have that in our mind, but we don't know exactly how it's going to work. That'll play out next year. Councilmember, did you have anything? No? Okay. So what do we want to do on the issue of consensus around the proportionality? Are we able to get to some consensus today, or is that something that's going to need to come back?
I'll throw it out.
Okay.
I'll just review, I think, what we're hearing, and then we'll get some conversation. It feels like to me that we would all be up for the idea of 1 through 10. Excuse me. It might be a compromise that we would rate them all 1 through 10, so there would be a total possible points of 50 and 50.
No, I think that's not necessarily. I think scoring, so it's not weighting them, it's scoring them 1 through 10. Each one of them, so it's a uniformity in scoring. And then we have a determination, Councilmember Ramirez and I, the way we described it, of what the weighting is between the two.
Yeah, we'll get to that conversation. I said rating, not weighting, so maybe you misunderstood me. Rating, we go with 1 through 10 on all 10. So I think we're there on that, 1 through 10, right? 100 points total, right? Well, it's 50 and 50, not weighted, Terrence, not weighted. Right now, it'd be, if it was 1 through 10 on the first 5 and 1 through 10 on the second 5, that would be a total of 100. Agree or not?
Then you just changed it from 2/3 to 1/3.
No, I'm changing it to 50-50.
The weighting could be applied after the
Yeah,
individual
I'm not on
ratings are
weighting
done.
yet.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I'll sort of start over since I'm not explaining myself clearly. Rating on performance measures and special initiatives, there's 10 items. If we can rate them 1 through 10, if he got a 10 on every single one, that would be 100 points. If he averaged 78, he got a 78 out of 100. Now, weighting, we need to have that conversation. What I'm hearing is that there might be a little bit of disagreement on the weighting. Okay.
Yeah, it's still not jiving. You've got, if you have 1 through 10
Yeah.
on each one, you've got 50 on each one,
Yes.
okay?
The total is 100. See, I don't understand what you're talking about, the weighting.
So if I could,
me, it's
you could
different.
still have each one, 1 through 10, 100, but then you could weight the bottom section higher than the top section. Through a
Then it's not
separate-
50-50,
At that point, you would weight it differently, correct?
correct, but that's why it was.
But there'd be an allowance for 10 points in each individual evaluation criteria.
Correct, you score each one,
Yep.
1 through 10,
Yep.
right? You have a top section and a bottom section. If you decided that it was 50-50, it would be 50-50.
But see, I see both parts very integral. You know, community relations, if you're going to have gateway beautification, economic development, he has to be out there creating relationships with the community. So community relations is very important and deserves that 10 points, but they work together. All 5 of those on top have to be necessary to get the 5 on the bottom done. Because Matt or any future city administrator is not going to be the one that's doing all that work. He is the leader who is getting the people underneath him to do the work, but he has to be working together with the council and his administration to get it done. I think we're overthinking this way too much right now.
So I guess explain maybe in a different way, okay? Which is their relative importance of the top to the bottom.
Correct.
Either they're equally important, the top one's more important, the bottom one's more important, and then how much of each. Because if you explain it that way, the rest of the scoring will fall into place however it needs to fall into. But that is the crux of the discussion that we're having, is the relative importance between the top and the bottom. Is it 50-50? Is it 2/3, 1/3 like it is right now? Is it 2/3 on the bottom and 1/3 on the top?
My sense, before you go, so my sense when I was speaking on behalf of council, I thought we had a consensus, is that I think the majority of us right now, and that's up for debate, the majority of us feel they're equal.
Correct.
Okay,
Because you
the
can't.
majority of us feel that they're equal.
You cannot do the bottom without the top. For example, fire services review. Okay, that means a lot more than just sitting down and saying, well, you know, we need.
No, but so I'm going to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt because this is the challenge that I wanted to be careful of, is that we're all going to disagree on the importance of each line item. This is why I want to stick to, just for a moment, is that the majority of us, not all of us, the majority of us feel they should be weighted equally.
Yes.
So I see that from Mr. Bracco, I see that from Carol, I see that from, right? I don't think I see it from Councilmember Fugazi or Ramirez, but I see it from the majority of us. Okay, so we're there with the majority of us, it's going to be equal. I think we agree that the rating, with an R, not a W, is 1 through 10 on all of them.
Right.
Okay? Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, all right. Meeting's over.
No,
So it would really help me, Terrence, if be specific. Because I think you're just trying to be too high level. Be specific. What do you want to see weighted higher or given more from something on the bottom and take less from something else so it still equals 100? Is that what you're trying to get at?
The reality of this is, I want 100% on the bottom, okay? That's the reality.
That's what you
Because
would
that's
want.
the world I live in,
Okay.
okay? You don't get brownie points for all of these other things. They're what has to happen in order for the bottom to happen.
Okay.
If the bottom doesn't happen, you're fired, okay? So that's the world I live in, right? I get that that's not this world, okay? But it's still, your outcomes are what matter. You get to define what those outcomes are, and we get to agree or not agree to what those milestones are. And luckily, unlike in a company, okay, we get to make a subjective rating that there were extenuating circumstances and you didn't hit this one, okay? In a real company, they're not going to care, you're fired, okay? But here we're going to be able to add a level of subjectivity to this, which is great. But I do believe that the outcomes are what matter, that the importance on figuring out how to do these matter more than anything else, okay? And you can get all of those things right on the top and still miss on all of these in a subjective way even, that you, hey, you never even really did what this was. You never really did what that was. So you asked for the opinion, here's the opinion.
No, I think it's important, man. You got to say it. So obviously you think the bottom is more important. I get that. But there's not one of those things down there that you want to try to lobby us to say, hey, put this higher than all the rest.
I've asked some of these questions just to make sure the discussion it happens, right? So the discussion of, are you sure that you want to weight all of those equally is an effort to bring out the discussion so we understand that that's possible, first of all, and then to bring out great logic like Greg had on the top of this, which is of those subjective things, those, yeah, it's going to go all over the place, so let's just make them even. I personally believe the ones on the bottom, we could come up with more relative importance, right? I also believe that there's a couple of layups there that that Councilmember Bracco put in, because there's less activity at the city administrator's level than to give them an equal weighting to one of the others. But I'm not going to, I'm not going to die on a hill on that either. But as a relative importance, absolutely, there's more importance on the bottom for me than there is on the top for those reasons.
So it sounds like we're still there unless something's changed.
I just would like to ask Matt his thought on the weighting.
Yeah, so that, what you see on the screen is my work, right? So I'm a believer that I'm running the organization for today and for the future, and that should be what I'm working on. The individual elements, the work item elements are important. Obviously, they're important to the council, and they're definitely elements that I'm committed to and I will deliver on. But in my mind, overly weighting them is short-sighted for the organization because it doesn't set us up for the future. And I'll give you an extreme example, and it's obviously risky because it's not me. I'm going to run the organization in the direction I take it no matter what, right? So, but another city administrator might say that the fire service review is so important to the council that we're going to invest. We're not going to hire one consultant. We're going to hire two consultants. We're going to spend $500,000 or $1 million on this, where we could do it for $100,000, and we're going to get it done because that's overly weighted in that category, right? So, and it's that short-sighted emphasis that I think we need to be cautious on when we're putting this together.
I agree with that, but I just meant if you were to go like 2/3, 1/3, 1/3, 2/3, 50-50, not specific line item weighting that more heavily, but how do you feel about the performance measures versus the special initiatives? Do you think they should be weighted equally, one more than the other?
Yeah, so the work on the board is mine. So that's the rating that I think that they should be. And that's what I'm putting forward. With that said, I think what you're going to find is when you sit down and do the evaluation next year, that you're going to have great constructive conversations, and the conversation is going to be more important than the individual items, right? Because you're going to identify where you want me. You're going to say that Matt's average, and you're going to give me an average rating, and that's going to come across, right? Or you're going to say that Matt's at the 95th percentile, and you're going to rate me at that level. That's going to be part of the conversation as you work through this. This is a means to the end, is is to help develop that conversation when you get there. It's great to have it. It's great to have the understanding. We need to have the understanding and have it documented. I think this is a great process. I'm totally happy with the progress we're making today. I think it's the conversation, again, is super important. But I think ultimately you're going to find that as you go through the evaluation process, that things start to really fall into place. Again, this is my work, so this is where I think it should be. But we're having this conversation because there's flexibility in that, and so I want to make sure that we're all comfortable with where we land.
Well, and I think that your input is important because, you know, you have to agree with this in my opinion.
There's another approach too, that for the special initiatives that I'd like to throw out there, that does, I think, fall in line more with what Matt's saying is instead of having very specific work item type things, you can, for instance, have, of the 5, it's one that's finance, and it has 3 key milestones around finance, right, that we expect to be met. One that is economic development, one that is public safety, right, with 3 key things that we want to have as milestones in public safety. And if it's done that way, it becomes a more consistent living kind of thing than if it's very specific on each one of those work item things. So the work item things become below that almost with a milestone on them. I'm just throwing it out there because it I think does address some of that.
Mayor.
So we've heard from Matt, we've heard from Terrence, we've heard from Kelly again. It still feels like that we're going down the path of they're going to be equally rated and equally weighted. Are you guys still there? The majority of council. Okay? Okay, so that's the path we're going down on. But what I am hearing, and this is where I think this is going to go down the road and not solved today, it sounds like that we all 100% agree that some of these items, even in the performance measures, need some line item specific goals.
Yeah, I think they just have more detail that can go into them and should be pulled from us to see what that should be.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with providing line item details. I don't think it's a polling. I think it's here's my professional recommendation on where we're going to be on these, and we have the discussion around that.
Okay. Councilmember.
Final suggestion is that that this be, you provide a brief preview of this to the candidates that are coming in for city council when you have that open meeting with them, once we know the list is, just to give them that preemptive heads up so they can try to come to the table as best prepared as they can to understand this, even if it means go back and watch the study sessions from March, you know, and that kind of stuff. So I think that would be helpful and more transparent for them to get caught.
Okay, so we're going to move on now to the next topic, which is very related, and that's the performance pay matrix. Once again, trying to give you something to work with for this discussion. As we commented earlier, performance pay is becoming more common in the public sector, but certainly not as much as in the private sector. So, with that said, I think with this approach, and if it's done right, and there's buy-in from you all, including Matt, I think this could be very successful and really drive the outcomes that I think you're all looking for. So I think that's great. What we've shown here, I'm going to kind of give my own opinion because Matt came up with this, and we'd brainstormed it. This is tilted heavily toward, any real performance pay is going to come if things are going extremely well, and he's getting a very good evaluation. So, and that I think aligns with what Matt shared with you last week, which is kind of his perspective is he likes to have stretch goals. And so, to get to a lot of the performance pay, we're really talking things are going very well, and the organization, they're achieving what you need them to achieve. And so that's just my own perspective in terms of how this is presented. I think we want to kind of get some input and comments and questions about this section. Councilmember?
I really like the format. It's something that was in the discussions when we were in ad hoc of how to do this. What it means is that nobody gets anything for being below a C. And so these rankings that you see here are based around a 70% to 100%. I can't remember what the total was on the contract. Was it 30 on the contract, or was it 40?
There was not a number.
There was no number, okay. So at 100%, you're at 40, at 95%, you're at the 30, and that whole idea works really well, and if it's going to be 100 points now, it becomes very mathematically easy
Yes.
to ascertain what that is. So I think this is a great way to go about it.
Mayor?
I'll give some perspective again. Thank you for bringing it up during the negotiations. We're at that point, like this, like the fact that you see that the $40,000 is a number for the performance pay. That was a number going back again to what the ad hoc talked about, is when there was when we first started the negotiations, there was an ask by Matt to get towards a direction of the high threes. Right, and it was at that point during those conversations is that we were saying, hey, we want you to get there too, but we'd like to do it in a different path. And I'm very content with the idea that to get to that point, that he has to score extremely high. So I like the way he set it up too, like what Terrence said, that a C is a C,
Yep.
and an A is an A.
Good, okay.
I would agree with that.
Councilmember?
I like the way it's structured, and it does incentivize it. You got to work at it, and you got to perform. So I like the end result of it. So I'm good with this.
I mean, realistically too, I just want to add, I come from a world where I want to see people win. I set people's numbers all the time. That's what I do in my career. So this may come as a shock to the public. It's fine, but I would, I personally, I'd make the number, a even higher reach goal, on some of this stuff, because it is hard to obtain, and it does make people, have a much higher incentive. And having even a further reach goal would be where I would stand. But I know it's harder to do in what we're doing and everything, but I just want to lay it out there that this is exciting for me to see that we can get to something like this. And I hope the public can understand that while it's not unique, it is avant-garde. And I do commend Matt for going down this road. Thank you.
Input from other council members? Comfort level with this? Council member?
I would like to see us make it where we're not limited, because something could happen and a city manager could really shine and, save the city a lot of money or something. And we would have the opportunity that if we want to go higher than this, we could go higher.
How about year two? I mean, this is, like you were saying, this is incredibly a great start. And I have no problem with the idea. I mean, we talked about that at the ad hoc. Let's not limit ourselves to the upper threes. But for me personally, I like the path that we're on. And definitely in year two, I like that idea. Or this council at any given time could do whatever it wants. If we all hit 75 points, we all give them an A+, maybe we need to think about that.
Well, the beauty is in reach goals, if you have super objective goals, right? And so if, as an example, it's sales tax growth, right? Which I know is hard to hit and everything else, right? But you're like, hey, look, here it is. If we hit 0.2% sales tax growth, that's great. But hey, if you hit a 0.8% sales tax growth, there's another 60 grand in the pot for you. Like, that's the part that is directly related to the health of any organization and those who are leading the organization and flowing all the way down, and I want to express that also, should participate in the success. That's how it works for me.
So if I just make a comment on these numbers, and I spent more than a little time working through these and how they're spread and what the top amount was. And I used another sort of larger city as a template because there's not a lot of examples out there of performance pay, but I wanted to have something to base it on. And I used lessons learned from that organization in setting this up. And I appreciate, and I think I'd love to see that there'd be a 1 in the bottom, in the front of the bottom number, right? I mean, that would be amazing, but I think that there's a different element that you need to consider, and that's public perception and what the public's seeing. And I get that it's easy to say today, if we're performing at that level, that's great. We'll have that conversation with the public, but I think ultimately when you get there, that's not the reality. The public doesn't have the depth and the knowledge that you all do, so that's why the structures tend to be more base pay with a more modest incentive associated with it. So that's sort of the structure and the concept that I put forward here, and that's why these numbers look the way they do. If you think they need to adjust this year, or if you want to put something in that looks at a two-year outlook in terms of what that bottom dollar amount looks like, and obviously the scale up to it, that's all fine. But just want to have sort of fair warning in what these conversations look like in 12 months.
Any other comments or questions? Sounds like there's support for this approach. Great progress. So, where do we go with this? Obviously, there's more work to be done in terms of the details, especially on the milestones, and Matt had mentioned what his plan is to propose on that. Ultimately, I believe this would need to go to open session for approval and would translate to perhaps an amendment to your employment contract? Andy, is that what it would mean?
Yes, it would have to go.
Yep.
After the City of Bell fiasco a few years ago, things like this have to be done in open session, of course, right?
Yeah, and I'll just commend you all on this entire conversation, and how you work together and the transparency. It's not every day you have conversations like this where the city manager, city administrator's compensation is discussed so openly. So I think it's fantastic. Matt, I want to make. Do we need to achieve anything more today, or do you have enough to come back to the council?
So let me frame what I'm hearing, and then
Okay.
we'll see, we'll see where we're taking. I think there's some decision points in here. So I think we've agreed on 50 points in the top, 50 points in the bottom, even 10 points for each item. I think that's something that we've come to consensus on. I think that there's some need for additional information associated with the bottom 5 on what that means. And so that comes in terms of milestones, and I can put that together, and I think that's probably our next big conversation is what that looks like. And then I think there's an adjustment from a rating perspective on the matrix on the dollar amount thing, but I think that's just a straight math exercise. And I can put that together as well. So the decision point becomes, if I'm on track here, the decision points becomes, do we do this as a follow-up study session so we can iron it out? So it's a meeting similar to this, or do I look for a council meeting in the near future that we can put this on and do it sort of all at once at the council meeting where we set the milestones associated with the special initiatives, and then adopt an amendment to the contract associated with the dollars. So the dollar amount will be a bonus structure, I think, in the contract related to the evaluation that we've discussed that the council will make. I don't think the evaluation criteria necessarily is part of the contract, because the contract lives for a long period of time. But the bonus structure, the incentive pay structure would be a part of that conversation. So I think that's where we're headed.
I will have one comment on that. I think the structure itself, it should be. I don't think that the details of anything obviously are there, but I think some of this structure of you're going to have these subjective things, and they're 50-50 weighted, I think is, and if a future council doesn't want that to be that way, there'll be a future amendment to change it.
Councilmember?
I think that there might be a need for, at least a short study session. I think that there might be conversation about the milestones. We might have different ideas of what we're expecting of you under each of those. That's just my opinion. And because I also want to hear, if I have an expectation of X under one of the milestones, and it's way off, then I need to hear why. You know, you might say, well, I don't have the resources to get it to you, you know, sooner, blah, 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 whatever. I just think that there might be the need for conversation. That's just my opinion. I don't know how anybody else feels.
I think I heard, if we have a special study session, it could be before a council meeting.
Yes,
It
please.
doesn't have to be a morning.
Please.
It doesn't have to be in the
Start
morning.
at 5, 4:30, 4 o'clock, whatever you want.
Yeah, I think we can get it done in an hour. Then what I heard Matt say, that he needs to add some details to the bottom 5, but I think I'm also hearing us say that we would like some details in the top 5 as well. That's when, input. Sure, but what I heard like Councilmember Bracco say is he wants to see some more objective goals in the performance measures as well, like when he was mentioning transparency and things like that. So I think through his conversations with council in the next couple of weeks, council members individually, that he'll be able to come up with some of those.
So let me just make sure I'm clear on that one. So when we go back and we talked about these individual ones, we're talking about more clarity with how we're defining that objective?
That's what I think I heard council saying. Yeah.
Is at community events, right? It may be more, it is a little bit more specific, but.
Got it, okay.
But it helps people when they're doing that evaluation to apply it more easily.
So I guess there'd be an opportunity to provide more input on these, and then obviously on the special initiatives, there needs to be much more work in terms of milestones and clarity on definition.
Yeah, to use his example, which had to do with transparency and it had to do with communication, right? And so not being specific to that situation, obviously in there, but specific to, well, there's already something in there that says ethics, so that's like transparency, it would be ethical. Well, it's not necessarily coming through to people. So is exhibiting a transparent government behavior, I'm just saying, is something that if we're going to evaluate people on those, and some people are better than others in reading between the lines, you might want to make certain things more clear, and that is entirely up to individual council members to lobby, so to speak, with you.
So let me put it, make it a shared responsibility then, I think. So with respect to the performance measures on the top portion, there's definitions in the packet that are a little bit more expansive than what you see on this slide. I would encourage you to take a look through those and identify if there's things that are missing. So I think from my perspective, those reflect what I'm trying to achieve, what I'm trying to say. So if there's things that I'm missing in there, and I'll take a look back certainly on transparency because it's been a big topic today. But if there's other things that you think are missing, please let me know so that I can make those revisions and include them so that we get a broader perspective in there. I think Dave started with this this is us presenting what we think is a workable framework, and we wanted this discussion. So I think we're having that, and this is a good step in that direction. If what you're asking for is Matt attended 5 events over the last year, or presented 150 things on the website, I can't get there. Yeah. Okay.
Good, so I think your summary was accurate, Mayor. So are we comfortable with where we're stopping today? And it sounds like there will be a study session associated with a future council meeting.
And I would like to add one more thing to add for folks to think about, and maybe it comes back as part of that study session. Going all the way back to closed session when we decided to move forward with Matt, there was some conversation. There was a little bit of conversation even in that meeting about what we're doing today. I think you brought it up a lot. And I think out of that conversation with another council member, at that point in time, because it was all brand new, that there might have been some concern about this system, about future councils, right? So is there a future council member that might come along and go 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, right? Which would throw off the entire weighting system. So something that we need to think about for the next meeting is there a way to mitigate that? Should we even think about that? Okay, so something to think about, right? So, and how do we mitigate that?
Yeah, so I guess Matt and I had a similar conversation. It's like, can you sit here and kind of bulletproof it Or do you have, you are going to contract with a facilitator. Facilitators do this work a lot, and so a little bit of trust that that facilitator is going to be able to work through, which sometimes does happen,
Yeah.
those type of scenarios.
Also, as a legislative body, when we're having that discussion, and if you have a completely unreasonable person, and you're like, what are you doing? You're putting a 0 on every one of these? And if shame doesn't work on that particular person, then we can take collective action to remedy the situation.
Exactly.
So-
Yep.
Because you would have, to give zeros, you'd have to give backup information. And I think that's when you go to do the rating, to give a score, you have to give a reason why you're giving that score with substantiated data. Yeah. It's-
Well,
Somebody, if we can't get to a consensus, then we say, okay, he's gonna put 0s on everything, I'll go ahead and put 10s on everything. That just, get rid of both of those and then you focus.
this is why I brought it up. I wanted this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's not about this council, the way I see it, it's about future councils. So,
Should we do public comment?
great.
Is there any public comment?
Great idea.
I have no speakers.
Thank you.
Okay, well, that was easy. So I think, Mayor, we can adjourn?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Great meeting.